Okay, is the mic on? I usually don't have a problem talking loud. Talking into microphone, that's where I have a problem because a lot of times they want you to almost put it right down your throat, and you think, ah. So anyway, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for coming. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. With those objectives in mind, the League works to ensure that all politicians represent each person equally, regardless of their financial status. Politicians are to serve the people, not wealthy special interests, by promoting transparency, limiting super PACs, and eliminating dark money. One person, one vote means that no matter who we are, our rights to healthcare, education, housing, and other basic needs are equally important. Please join me in welcoming the President of Michiganders for Fair and Transparent Elections, Hank Mayers. Hank is dedicated to advancing campaign finance reform as shown through his 40-year career focused on improving quality of life in healthcare and public service. And he will discuss how money in politics has had a corrosive effect on American government and sown division in our everyday lives. Hank's group and other state democracy advocacy groups have joined hands to prepare a Michigan ballot for measure for 2026 to fix some of these problems. So, Hank, you're going to come up here and give your presentation. At the end of the presentation, he will take questions from the audience. And we would like to have, if you've got a question, to line up over here, and then we will take them as you stand in line. Okay? Hank, take it away.
I got right here.
Oh, okay.
I assume I can be heard looking to the, there we go. Okay, excellent. That's one technology down, and here we go. Okay, so yeah, that kind of says how I feel about this topic, because that is in fact what's happening. Your and my votes are beginning to not matter even when we cast them. However, as overwhelming as this situation feels, it can be fixed. Did I just push the wrong button? I may have. There we go. Okay. However, political system and its participants are not going to get it done. You, me are going to get it done. They're the only people that can get it done, as I'm going to prove to you tonight. This afternoon, I guess. Late. Okay, any rate, there's the poop on me. Our group we've been at this for about 7 years. We are part of 2 national groups, and I'll be talking particularly about the American Promise piece of this in just a little bit, but we've been around for a while. We are a registered ballot committee of the state of Michigan, and a registered, what do they call it, 501c4, and we also have a 501c3. Okay, all right, so that's kind of how it looks these days. And it just keeps growing, right? And if you probably might have a hard time reading what that says, but that's what that says, okay? And that's what's happened. We are being completely overwhelmed. As you'll see in a little bit, we cleared $20 billion in the 2004 election. And by the way, that does not count all the state election dollars. That's strictly the federal election. So there you have it. In 24, we grew to 20 billion, which is kind of amazing. But I think the thing we want to see here, let's see, does this thing doesn't have a pointer, or does it? Probably not. Okay. Ooh, there we go. Okay. All right. So, okay. So we'll start, right at the moment. But what's amazing about this is it grew by 25%. That was after it exploded. 16 was a little over 6 billion. 4 years later, $16 billion. It nearly tripled, please. Nearly tripled. Okay. And if that wasn't enough, it grew further. This is nuts. Sure. And I'm going to send a copy of the slide deck to Deb. There we go. Thank you, Deb. And she can distribute it, but feel free to take a picture of anything. Except me, but that's all right. No, actually, you can take a picture of me. Okay, now that's the federal election, right? Well, the state election had a similar experience. This is 18 to 20. This is 2 years. Just 2 years. grew by 42%. This is the total. Let's see, this is, let me still check it, all races, right. This is our House of Representatives. And in that same election, this is in 20, we had a whole bunch of races that cleared $1 million. Now this is state rep. This used to be, you know, under 100,000, right? Not anymore. And the winner of 107 of the 110 House races, the winner that won had the most money. And that's what drives is that you start by saying, well, we got to raise at least what was raised last time, because that won it last time. And there are other forces that you're going to see as I go through this. But at any rate, and this one is the 10 most expensive races. And that basically, for all intents, doubled. Okay? Okay, so now, this is where the corruption starts. That's a call center that House and or senators in the U.S. Congress, and same thing in Lansing, is where you go to raise money. You can't do it on public property. It's illegal, okay? So House members, when they first get there, I mean, as soon as they get their hand off the Bible, right, they've just been sworn into office, up walks the party and says, by the way, you've got a lot of money to raise. And remember, you're going to have very little time to do that. So we've got this call center all set up for you, and they're going to spend upwards of 30 hours a week. You're going to say to yourself, 30, there's only 40. Right. That's how it turns out. There's where they spend their time. Now, if all that isn't bad enough, your legislator is being forced to participate in what I call the school of undue influence and corruption. Because, let's see, okay, I'm going to pick. You're running for office. And you went, you know, or wait a minute, yeah, let's see, okay, yeah, you're running for election, or you just got there. Doesn't matter. You went there for a reason, right? It was not to raise money. You went to do something. Exactly. So, how can you make it so that you spend the least amount of time in here? Bill, you got to do it yourself. You want to raise big money, you can't give it to anybody but you, because they won't answer to anybody but you. Yeah, big money. You will find the people who will give you the most, the fastest, so you get out of this hell. Okay? There you go. They've just rammed right into this thing. You want to be honest? Fine. But now, let's talk about dark money. The dark money is not that. That's my friend Bart. Okay, Bagman Bart. Now, Bagman Bart, he kind of used to do that thing, but you don't have to do that anymore because it's in the open. The way it works is there's entities known as 501c4 nonprofit social welfare groups. Because they are nonprofits at the moment, they enjoy the right of privacy, okay? And they can spend half of their money in the election, okay? Never tell anybody who gave it to them. They're legally allowed to make secret money. And it's a fact that some of these guys draw foreign money. Gee, we need that in American elections, don't we? Foreign money, okay? In addition, it's often, as you'll see a little bit later, people will give money to one group, and that group gives money to a second group, and that gives money to a third group. Now, in business, that's known as money laundering, and it's illegal as all get out. But in our elections, nope, it's not illegal. Not yet. I'm going to talk about that. That's the key thing. And by the way, the only people who don't know who gave money to a 501c4 is you and me. People who gave the money have already told the campaign that they're doing this. In fact, the campaign often says, okay, so here's, I have a slide piece for this, but I didn't include it. I probably should have. All right, let's do it this way. I've got a check for $100,000 that I want to give you to be elected. And so I walk up to your campaign manager or your financial manager, and I say, I got $100,000. Yeah, here you go. No, you can't do that. You can only give me $5,800 because we put limits on money that the campaign organizations can actually accept, okay? But I got good news for you. You can give money to this super PAC who's all about us, And super PACs are what's known as an independent expenditure group. They have no limits to how much money can be given to them. They have no limits to how much money they can spend. And they are frequently all about one candidate. Okay? Now, but you're going to be made public because they have to list their donors. That's part of being an independent expenditure committee. And so I know that Deb, even at the moment, this is the dark side Deb as opposed to the real Deb, okay? But I know that Deb's husband, she doesn't want her husband to know that she's giving money to me. So I said, don't worry, Deb. There's this 501c4 over here. They're all about me too. Give it to them, you have no problem. That's how it played, folks. Okay? Now, and as I mentioned, the money that goes into it includes foreigners, frequently out of state, big time. And one of its biggest sources is politically active nonprofits. And I just walked you through that game. By the way, you don't necessarily have to talk to my campaign about where these groups are. They're advertising in the media. They're giving those cards you get in the mail and the things you see on the TV. They're all part of making that stuff happen. So, but why are we concerned? Whoops, I did it again. Okay. Why is dark and secret money a concern? Well, because it defeats your right to cast an informed vote. The people and the nature of the money that is given to a candidate or is given to organizations that are all about the candidate tell you a great deal about what that person is going to do if you elect them. But when we're dealing with dark money, you don't have any knowledge about where it came from. It's also, we did some analysis. It's like for campaigns that experienced, this was back in 18 now, 18? For campaigns that experienced $1 million or more in opposition money that was dark, or excuse me, the money that was in a campaign that was dark, 89% of it was opposition funding against that candidate. And not surprising, we're talking particularly with the nonprofits, this is dark money. So, you know, you can do all kinds of things with that, and you're not personally held accountable for your behavior or the people who take your money. And once they get into office, this has undue influence. Believe me, your representative, whether at Washington or Lansing, understands that the people that gave them serious money need to have the phone call answered, not by the aide, but by them. Okay? So federal money, well, like everything else, it's exploding. It literally doubled. These are just 4-year presidential cycles, right? That's part of it. That's part of it. The whole picture is that a whole lot of very uber money is playing games with the rest of us. Now, what's interesting here, and remember I talked about money laundering and so I'm going to show you how this actually did happen. So looking at 2020, we're looking at about $1.2 million, right? $1.2 billion, excuse me. Now, let's take a look at this. This is politically active nonprofits, okay? The green money is the direct spending. Buttons right here. Direct spending, that's where they actually do ads, right? And this is when they give money to another group, and that money's dark because it just says it comes from the Friends of the Striped Bass. It doesn't say who gave the Striped Bass the money, okay? And then the gold, the gold, okay, is where they give money and there's partial identity involved in it. But the thing I want you to see is this, 2018, 2020, kaboom. It gets to be almost $800,000, excuse me, $800 million, okay? That's a very large portion of the 1.2 billion you just saw, okay? This is a huge problem and it is exploding. Now, that only happens in Washington. Nope, it happens here lots. In 2018, the biggest class of brief, I don't know what button I'm pushing. Anyway, the biggest amount of money was dark in that governor's race. Okay? And I can assure you that still happens. How in the world did we get here? Meanwhile, I took a look at this last night. I thought to myself, it makes it look like the Republicans and Democrats are confused about this. Oh, no, they're not. They're a big part of it. Okay, but how we get here? Well, Supreme Court and Citizens United, another one, Buckley Vallejo, and another one, McCutcheon case. But 5 or 6 of them that put together basically have turned the whole thing on its head. And we already talked about the advocacy groups have, they're the dark money guys. They have privacy rights. And then they declared that money equals speech, therefore it's got First Amendment rights. They are basically argued, gee whiz, you can't really do much advertising about spending money, so they're one and the same. Oh yeah, exactly. They're saying this, of course, is the one we all think is lots of fun. Corporations are people. They get the same rights in the election as you and me. Nuts. And this is another great one. Direct bribery, it's also a quid pro quo. Okay, trouble with Latin, but it means I'm going to walk up to you, Cindy, and I'm going to say, I really appreciate all the service you're giving to us here in Michigan. And by the way, our company is looking for permission to open a plant that's going to pollute and so forth. And here's $100,000, and I hope you can help us out some way. Just leave it there. And so she tucks the money. So that's old style corruption. But we're in a whole new world. There's whole bunches of new, very corrupt practices that our friends, our less than enlightened friends, don't want to deal with. One of them is those independent expenditure groups. They spend huge amounts of money. And the candidates know who's putting money into those super PACs that do such a wonderful job for them. They know who it is. I think corruption, excuse me, of course it's corruption. Oh yeah, see, if I'm going to put $100,000 on the table, believe me, I am buying stuff. I am buying access and all the rest of it. And I will make very sure that I gave them that money. Usually I tell the campaign finance manager who whispers in the representative's ear, but they know. They probably, I don't know this for a fact, but there's no obstacle for them, for instance, to gain the donor list. In fact, it's right. The donor list to the super PAC is public information, okay? And so I go and make 100,000 donation to the super PAC. And, a week or two later, they buy a big ad spread in the media to say how wonderful things are about the candidate. And then the donor lets basically the campaign know that I put some money out there in one way or another. And because I won't spend that kind of money about knowing I'm going to get a result. That's the whole driving force here. So let's see. And we talked about that, the old-fashioned idea that government regulation is unlimited direct bribery. By the way, we used to be able to put limitations on this kind of stuff. We had it. What we're seeking is to get it restored, not to create some new ability. Okay. Well, our friends in the legislature, they're bought and paid for too. There was a package known as the Bright Act that was introduced in 2024, and it became very apparent that the leadership of the House was all about the money. I can't tell you how many chairmen of committees and so forth saw various very important things die because, for one thing, the leader of the House had a hissy fit and just did the unthinkable, and basically sat on legislation like the Bright Act thing that was introduced in March. They only got one, maybe 2 hearings on what were 7 bills, and that was it. And they had to fight to have it happen. And then ultimately it all died. Well, you all know too much about the December of 2024. But Joe Tate, that's the name. And he's running for Detroit mayor. I tell you, some people walk around with a lot of illusions. At any rate, But it basically proves that, you gotta remember, the Democrats were all about doing something about the money, right? Particularly when they didn't have as much as Republicans, but now they do. Actually, in the 2024 election, there was more Democrat money in the election than there was Republican. Okay. At any rate, and the last piece of legislation they actually passed created independent expenditure committees. Legislature's all about. Okay, like I told you before, it's on us. You can't count on those people to get it done. Even the good ones got to play by the game if they want to serve the next term. Drives them crazy. So that is a ballot measure that is currently out there, which you want to circulate for shortly. Yeah. Oh, I understand. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Right. Right. Now that's all about our power sources, our utilities, and so forth, and keeping them from giving money to candidates and or organizations that are affiliated with candidates. And by the way, it also precludes being able to give donations to all the primary elected people in Lansing, okay, even if it's not election time. It blocks both of those. Now, we have, in addition to that now, our ballot measure, show Michigan the money, show MI the money, is to deal with dark money, because MMOP doesn't address dark money, okay? Now, and I have no doubt that when the MMOP bill or piece gets approved, and it will be, and it'll be a good thing, that our friends in the utility industry are going to go dark. Okay, that's what they're going to do. And we're going to be there to say, sorry, we know who you are, we know where you gave the money, and by the way, that was illegal as hell, which in their bill says that you have to pay 10 times what it was you gave these guys. Another thing ours does, as you'll see, is it gives the Secretary of State some serious power and people to actually have the sheriff on the beat with this crazy thing known as the Wild, Wild West American election system, okay? And I'm also going to talk very briefly about getting at the problem of being able to set limits at all, which is we need the United States constitutional amendment to get our rights back. I'll talk about that briefly. So I want to talk about our ballot measure. Okay, I plugged MMOP, but now I'm going to talk about this. By the way, this, well, I guess I'll get there. You'll hear in a little bit about where we are in the cycle. Okay. Right now, final corrections are being made to this ballot measure. And we're doing some message testing to see how it'll go. Hopefully that's not my phone. I silenced it. Okay, now, in November, we hope to submit our petition to the State Board of Canvassing. In the winter, we anticipate approval of that petition, and we know that just like the MMOP, we're going to attract a great deal of resistance by the money sources. And you guys and us are going to end up going to court, and we turn our signatures in, because they're going to try and stop it, as sure as I'm standing here talking about it. Okay? And we will win, because there's no argument that can be made to stop it, that I know of, at any rate. March, we begin petitioning circulating our petition. In June, we hope to have got 600,000 signatures, because this is an amendment. The MMOP measure is a statute, which risks the legislature going with it. However, it does give them a lower count, probably about 200,000 less that they have to collect. However, what we're trying to do here cannot even risk the possibility of the legislature fooling with it. Remember I said they won't fix it? We have to fix it. We have to make sure that when we decide it, that's the end of it, this is it, just like we did with the citizen redistricting. Okay, and November of 26, we expect to get at least 70%. Why do I, in terms of approval, why do I know that? Okay, our ballot measure is probably 60% of it is based on a successful ballot measure in Arizona, 2026. This is Arizona. Not talking about Massachusetts or Wisconsin, where we got lots of blue folks. You got lots of red folks there, okay? 72% of Arizonans passed it. So this thing is going to sail into history if we can get it for the voters. Now let me talk about the measure, okay? From a transparency point of view, anybody that spends $10,000 or more in an election is going to have to disclose where they got their money and where they spent. Every time they spend 10,000 more, they have to report again. We're not going to treat them like campaign organizations because technically they're not election organizations. Most of this will be dealing with not only 501c4s, 501c5s that are union organizations, 501c6s, which are things like the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, and those kinds of folks. Everybody, I don't care who you are, you spend 10 grand doing an ad or something like that, if you don't disclose, you're in very big trouble. When you disclose, you have to tell us every donor that you've got that gave you anything more than or 2,500 or more. And you have to tell us every expenditure you've made at 1,000. Issue ads, by the way, those are all the ads we get that don't talk, that don't say vote for Hank or don't vote for Hank. Those are called express advocates. Those have been regulated for a long time. You do that, you got to. All these ads that say Hank is a great guy. You know, he's done great public service, and you know, I think y'all ought to maybe doesn't even tell you to do anything. It just lauds the praises of the person who's running for office. Technically, in Michigan, we're unusual in this regard. Technically, in Michigan, those ads are not election ads. We do not require anybody to report on them. A lot of states already do because of the federal elections, you do have to report. Okay. Now, what's interesting here, we call this the electioneering window. Okay, when these things turn from benign to having to report to the Secretary of State. Okay. Now, they're going to start 120 days before the primary. That means April 1st. So from April 1st to November, they have to report. This is a little different. This is one of the differences between ourselves and MMOP. And that is MMOP says 60 days before I think it's 60 days before the primary. And then 60 days before the general and 30 days before the primary. What we do is we cover the entire window and we make it wider. Okay? And that's a contribution to MMOP. It's not really anything that I think they'd be upset about. I understand. Not a problem. Not a problem. And by the way, there's a fair amount of communication between ourselves and particularly VNP that's very much involved in the MMOP. And we're one of the parties that helped us assemble our ballot measure is promote the vote. So we're very much involved, as you'll see in a minute, trying to plug things together. So, and now let me get the little button here. Okay, so they got a report if they spend 10,000 or more and 2,500 per donor, right? We're saying that it's got to be the original. If the donor money that my 501c4 is giving to Cindy, and it's got money from Deb, I have to tell Cindy that that came from Deb. Knowing it's the Friends of the Striped Bass doesn't cut it. If Cindy wants to spend that money, she has to have behind it information on who all the original donors are for the donations, 2,500 or more. They all got to be persons, real live persons. Okay, not corporations. Nope, nope. Let's see now. Okay, wrong button. And in their ads, when they place an ad, they don't say it's the Friends of the Striped Bass. They say this was financed by Deb, Cindy, Kim, who are our three top donors. So they are the people that provide the resources to the ad you just listened to. Okay, that's how ads are going to be. Okay, now, one of the things that's a very big problem, and the insiders understand this, this is a little more complicated to explain, but there's a thing called, remember the independent expenditure groups that I talked about? They have the right to spend any amount of money and take in any amount of money. Well, the only reason they have that right is our friends at the Supreme Court. At any rate, the Supreme Court said that since they're independent, they're just speaking politically. They're exercising the First Amendment right. They're just a political. And because of that, people are exercising their First Amendment rights. Don't get in the way of people exercising their First Amendment rights. It ain't legal. Okay? So, what they do and their level of distance or failing that coordination is a big problem. In our mind's eye, it basically defiles their claim that they're independent. And if you're not independent in Michigan, it's going to become a problem. Right now, it's just a mess. And this is where some of the wildest, the wild, wild west behavior takes place. So first thing we do is if you can't hire somebody, this is an independent group now, which includes the 501c4s and includes the independent expenditure groups. Okay, they can't hire someone who's worked for the candidate and support the candidate. And that block is for 2 years, okay? You can't, in effect, buy inside information and coordinate in that fashion. And trust me, this goes on very regular basis right now, okay? Stops candidates, this is an interesting game. The way they've put the law and the presumption is, you know, Cindy and I'm coordinating with Cindy. So we whisper and talk, we send emails. Oh, passe. That is not, they're smarter than that. What they do on their website, and sometime go look at it. Usually it's towards the end of the website, a little hard to find. You got to wander around, got to know where to find it. And it's called a red box. Literally, it's surrounded by a red box that says, geez, you know, we're really concerned about the youth vote in Berrien County. We really want to go after that one. That is a signal to the independent group to go spend money in Berrien County. And I haven't even pointed at Cindy. It's on my website, free and clear. Not when we're done. Okay. Oh, by the way, the other thing that happens is frequently these groups will use the exact same advertising collateral, literally the card stock, what's printed on it. They'll circulate it for the candidate. Never ask the candidate to do that. Okay, firewall, and I'm always uncomfortable with this, but my lawyer and friends have told me, Hank, you know, you get involved in people's right to earn a living and all the rest of it. So if somebody hires somebody that's a relative or somebody that worked for the candidate or whatever, they can continue to service the candidate if these people are over here working on not the candidate's work. And there has to be, quote unquote, a firewall between them and these guys that are working for the client, or excuse me, the candidate, who these people either married to or work for or whatever. And they have to work on something else. And so the difference we're going to make here is people claim a firewall and doesn't exist. Under our piece, you will have to prove the effectiveness of your firewall by clearly identified procedures. And this is one of the areas where the auditing staff, that I'll talk about in just a second, becomes very, very important. What's going to happen is if you are found in breach of the requirement of being independent, if it's proven that Cindy and I've talked and I've done this and done that, and it's clear that my organization is not independent from Cindy. What happens is what you did and the value of it, okay, is considered a in-kind contribution. What that means is what you were to give them is subject to the limits of in-kind contributions to a candidate, which is a lot smaller than what you'd have to spend to do an ad in the Detroit metro area, okay? And the rest of it is a violation. And you will be subject to triple damages. Okay, so now this is one of the really important parts. I'm really proud of this because our problem is the Secretary of State has almost no power to do anything about this stuff. Okay, somebody files a complaint or whatever. Sometimes you can deal with it, but they don't have any auditing staff, right? I mean, they don't have fact-finding people. We're going to change that. We're going to require the legislature to appropriate. We don't tell them how much. You can in a constitutional measure. You cannot tell the legislature to appropriate X amount of bucks. You can tell them they got to appropriate for a purpose. And so what we're saying is you have to do that for financing, auditing, information technology, and enforcement. At the least, that has to be funded adequately. And for the auditing, to give you a feel for what we expect of the legislature, or give them a feel for what we expect of them, $10 for this purpose is not going to get it done. You can't grossly under appropriate for these purposes because we're saying the staffing that you will fund must be capable of auditing 5% of all the organizations that report to the Secretary of State. So, and what that does is that says there indeed is a cop on the beat. There are auditing people that will proactively go out and say, hey, I want to take a look at your books. Of course, they've already got what you have sent in your reporting. If you did 10,000, that reporting we talked about, there'll be data in there that they can work with and so forth. And that will give them information about what looks like pretty suspicious transactions. That gives them a lead, but also just randomly showing up and saying, we'd like to see your income, we'd like to look at your expenditures, see where they went, et cetera. Right now, people engaged in elections do not have to look over their shoulder, not for one split second. The campaigns do, and the party groups do, because they have limits set on them. Everybody else, even the ones that are violating the independence thing, they are not looking over their shoulder. It's the wild, wild west. It really is. Is that the wrong button? Sure. And then the auditing, I just talked about that. Veto power. You can't say go away. And if you don't give what we need, you're going to find yourself in court. But Secretary of State can seek an injunction of egregious activities taking place and put it to a stop in the middle of the election. Not 18 to 24 months later, which is normally what it takes to figure out what's going on, or to find the press, having spent enough time to look at a particular entity and organization, reveals wrongdoing. Long after you and I voted and had no idea that that was going on. Okay. And then allowing citizens have documented complaints, that they can submit that. We expect that will probably be people who finally have a heart and turn in the organization that's got them working on the campaign, violating all kinds of stuff. Some of our advisors in this said that's kind of what happens when it gets just too bad. Somebody says, I can't stand this anymore. But they can't. There really isn't a process for citizen complaints at the moment. Okay, now, hopefully you've got an idea of the answer to this question, but I'm going to show you. First of all, they make it illegal, right? To fund elected folks. And as I said before, we're going to catch them trying to go dark. Okay? Stop them cold. And what I'm hoping is when this is in place, our friends in utilities say the jig's up because we just can't pull it off. Yeah. Yes. This takes care of them and everything. But it doesn't supersede what's in there because the key thing about what happens with MMOP is violation costs you 10 times whatever it was that you gave the person. Ours is 3%, but the reality of ours is it deals with anybody who's putting 10,000, anyone who is spending, I think the key thing I want you to understand is the thing that trips the revelation is the actual expenditure of funds to communicate or do other things that are partisan or for a particular candidate. That action is what causes the reporting, and that reporting expects and will audit you to make sure that you can account for who the original donors were on the old stuff you got. So the utilities are not going to be able to hide. It's a 1-2 punch. Now, there's another reason why we don't duplicate. Okay, there's the MMOP circulation, right? It's going to be done about February. Okay, there's ours. We're coming up right behind. And we are hoping that, and we're pretty optimistic about this. And most of the people that are engaged in that one are going to say, sure, let's finish the job. Because that's what that does. So now let's talk for just a few minutes about this, getting our rights to set limits back. Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. These guys have to prepare a resolution that says, therefore, and from forthwith, there will no longer be blah, 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 blah. And they create it, and they pass it. Both chambers have to pass it, I think, with 2/3 vote. And then they send it to all 50 of us, where we have to basically enact it through our legislature. And that's where, when we get done doing what I just talked about before, yes, ma'am. And in fact, sure, we are going to deal with this problem, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get it going. So, for our Freedom Amendment is one of the proposed amendments out there. That's the one that's associated with our group. And it does deal with all of those things that basically killed our ability to set campaign donation laws. That amendment tells the Supreme Court, by the way, that's what amendments do. They tell them, a lot of them have been built and were passed to tell the Supreme Court, sorry, you got it wrong. This is how it works. And it says, first of all, corporations and other non-human persons can be treated differently than natural persons. By the way, just to the election world, one of the things it does with great effectiveness is confuse the daylights out of it. See, you and I are persons, right? Well, in the election world, so are corporations. Everything is a person. So when you read stuff that is their legal whatever, or you're looking at the law, whatever, and it says person, remember, they're talking about everybody, okay? Okay, so now, and it also says that money, in fact, does not have First Amendment rights. It's separate. Okay? Federal and state governments may reasonably regulate campaign money, just like they used to do. That's what that amendment, American Promise, that's what they're all about. That's what they're saying. There are other amendments to try and really nail it to corporations and tell them they got other things they don't have rights. And we don't want to get into a death fight with corporations over what their legal rights are generally. Just want to have it understood that they're not natural human beings, and voting was never for a corporation, because when we passed the Constitution, corporations didn't exist except chartered corporations, which were for very specific purposes. Independent corporations did not exist. And let's see, place budget support. I'm supposed to bring that. I can tell you more about those guys if you would like to be involved in supporting them. So, and that's okay. So that's the URL. When you get the slide deck, you'll have it. Is this ambitious to get this done? Sure it is. However, we're partly there. 23 legislatures have actually passed a resolution like this that is exhorting their congresspersons or delegations, get on with it. Give us this amendment. There's some very quiet work being done in the Michigan legislature right now to see if we can't get one passed now. But, you know, we're not going to give up. If it's not this year, it's next year. 35 are needed. Roughly that number is needed to compel Congress to do that, because if you get up to like 38, the states can get together and do it themselves. Nobody wants a constitutional convention because there are a lot of crazy ideas that people would like to put into our Constitution that we really don't need. And this, believe it or not, has been done before. That's how we got the right to directly vote for our U.S. Senate. That's exactly what we're doing now. So what we need you guys to do. Remember I said we all got to do this? I'm serious. It takes all of us. Let us know if anybody else we can speak to. We'd love to have you volunteer. In fact, I've got some clipboards over there. I can put you on a newsletter. I can get you involved in all kinds of stuff we're doing, and definitely want to know if you're interested in circulating for us. Please consider donating. It takes money to get this done. Just getting the blue and circulars printed is a serious wad of cash. Sign up for our newsletter. That's what that sheet's about. And if we succeed in getting a resolution prepared in the legislature this fall, we're going to need to do some call banking to pressure legislators to move on this. And then March is a circulation effort. That's the URL to find out more about us. And by the way, those little white cards, the QR on that takes you to our welcome page, and you can then say, I'd like to donate, volunteer, just a newsletter, whatever. And I think that's what I've got to tell you. Thank you. I don't think so. Oh, you got to have the microphone. That's right. Yeah, got to use the mic.
The American Promise, the slide that you had, and it had Michigan at the bottom, is it a national organization?
Yes.
And then there's chapters? How many people are involved in this work?
Well, I don't know as I've seen a number. I know that there are active people in, let's see here, Massachusetts for sure, New York, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Montana, California, Texas, believe it or not, Virginia, and I don't know what the numbers are, but for instance, I know the Virginia chapter quite well, and there's probably a dozen people that are really on the ground doing stuff. And what's interesting about Virginia is Virginia has almost no money in politics regulation at all. It's kind of unbelievable. And so our folks are as much engaged in that effort to just get limits set on what candidates can accept. And I believe, I'm certain of this, Virginia allows candidates to spend their campaign chest money on themselves. That doesn't happen here. So you got a whole range of things, but yeah, there's quite a few people.
Thank you.
Involved.
Can I ask a second question?
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then also, do you do this full time, or is this a part-time endeavor?
Right. I wish it was part-time. Yeah, this is the first really challenging job that I never got paid for. We've been doing this since 2018. The background on me is I went to college during the Vietnam War days, and I was in Washington, D.C. And I went to D.C. because I was natively, if you will, intuitively concerned about what we do for each other and the kind of communities we live in. Washington taught me about civic action. It was also the time where this would have been, my freshman year, Bobby Kennedy was shot, and so was Reverend King, and it upset me profoundly. And I said, something's got to be done, and I didn't know what that was. Decided that I'm going to be part of it, and did 22 years in Michigan state government. Was involved with information technology a great deal, and I was in social services and basically implemented the program. find resources when they're in need. And ultimately left state government and went to work the private sector implementing health information technology, medical records, and that kind of thing. Then after that, I decided to do a little teaching to the next generation of people that will be working on information systems in healthcare. By the way, one of the reasons why I was so passionate about that, some of the stuff I did in social services involved the Medicaid program. And it was very clear why information technology for me in that realm was so critical was healthcare's #1 problem is failure to communicate. And if you've had anybody in the hospital recently, you've experienced how that works. Nobody intends to do it. Happens. So anyway, so it was always part making healthcare more effective in that sense. So, and then in 2018, I saw an image on the television regarding Southern border. Totally. And then responded to something with American Promise. 30 minutes later, the guy called me up. And 30 minutes later, I found myself volunteering. And, so the kind of America we have is really important. And at the moment, we don't really have a representative democracy. It's an oligarchy. Okay. That's got to stop. I want kids to have democracy. I grew up good time. Sister-in-law who said to me once, America's greatness is over. And I love it. And it's camping. Well, she's more observant than me. But I can't take it. And I suggest to you that if you decide this is going to feel better, even though it looks bad, trust me, if you're working to change it, you will feel better. I guarantee it. So that's
my question is, I'm assuming that the dark money groups are going to be coming out pretty strong against this.
Oh, yes.
So how do you plan to outmaneuver them?
Well, my biggest point of confidence is that I know what we're trying to do is very legal. There are precedents in, you mentioned Arizona. There's also precedent. This one's encouraging, by the way. A lot of people don't know this. Rhode Island came up with a bill called their Disclose Act, which is modeled significantly after the one that's been introduced in Congress, but hasn't gotten much traction. Now, and a lot of what we're trying to do was in there. It's a couple things that are different, and they didn't have any of the enforcement. However, they were challenged. Usually, Americans for Prosperity is usually very prominent, taking you to court. They usually find one nonprofit or another that they bring into it so that they have standing to bring the case in the locality. They did that in Rhode Island. They went through federal court. The federal district said nothing wrong with what Rhode Island's trying to do. The appeals court said nothing wrong with what Rhode Island's doing. Supreme Court did not. That's very important. Okay? And the Arizona piece is also in its, at this point, state courts. No problem. So where they're going to cause us frustration is as we close in on 600,000 signatures, they're going to go to court saying there's something wrong with our circulation. That's what they argue. They might even try and argue that we're trying to do something unconstitutional, which will probably on First Amendment issues and something. They're going to do the same thing to the MMOP. They're choking off the right of utility to speak. And that doesn't cut it because our piece does not say you cannot put money into the election. It says if you do, we need to know who the money came from. Okay? That's not getting in your way. And the other interesting thing about the MMOP, I'll plug this for them. I used to think they had a risk of First Amendment, except they don't, because they exempted utilities putting money into independent expenditure committees and ballot. So they have not squashed their right to speak. They simply said you cannot corrupt public officials. And so, any rate, that's a
Okay.
long-winded answer. Could never predict the judiciary, as we know.
Mhm.
However, everything looks very encouraging, but we will have to spend some serious money, which where the donations come in, to defend ourselves. We will definitely be in court somewhere in July or
Thank you. Okay, real quickly, I gotta run out, but, so as a petitioner for many groups over the course of the last 8 years, it kind of gets exhausting.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, and I really appreciate your, presentation. I love this idea, but I am curious, are groups not working together? What happened? Like, what happened? Did VNP not reach out to you, or what's the background? What's the scoop here?
Sure. Some groups that are in democracy
Mhm,
enjoy getting 501c4 money.
mhm. Yeah.
And the current director, Christie, is very supportive about what we're doing. We haven't asked her to do anything official with the board yet. We wanted to wait till we actually have the document done. They could share it with people. Up there. The previous director, however, took the view that they wanted to do something more limited. And in my conversations with her, she did talk about the ambivalence they had about what the 501c4. And by the way, I want to explain something about the 501c4. This is really important. Okay. You can look at a 501c4 as having like two classes of activity. One is advocacy, and one is election promotion, involved in election. And, you know, in a kind of way, it makes sense because if you're advocating around public policies, get a public policy that you want, you've got to work with the legislature, right? And that's part of the reason why they're allowed to do both. Now, our point is that, and what happens here is what's reported, what has to be reported is what is spent in the election. In advertising, electioneering messages starting in April 1st, and other kinds of election stuff going on. The reality is if your money gets into the election, your money has to be public. Now, that does not say that the 501c4s have to reveal the donors that give them advocacy money. We don't touch that. We look on it as two different parts of the same organization. This has got to be treated like everybody else that's in the election. No special breaks. This is advocacy. You need protection sometimes because there are people that aren't for what you're about. It's all part of the liberty to assemble, what that logic is. And so we are not touching that. So our view is 501c4s don't have anything to worry about. However, I will acknowledge that when they get money at the moment, it all goes in one pot. Okay? Advocacy and election, it all goes in one pot. And they are supposed to, but not all, but most, adhere to the rule that says you can't spend more than 49% of your money in the election. Because if it's more than that, you are by definition an election organization. That's what most of your money's going to. So they stay under there. All right, now, remember, this is one pot. They haven't divided it. And part of what goes on that a lot of people don't understand is there is this, I wish I had my diagram. Okay, stay with me. You got to go circulate, don't you? Take care. There are groups known as 501c3 donor advised funds. They were originally set up for you and I to theoretically create a foundation to do something good in our community. And that you could bring other people into it. And the community foundations that some of you may know about, are built on this model. Well, right now, there are now donor-directed funds that are basically political in nature. They are all, there's a thing called a 1630 fund, which is all about progressive policy. And there's another one called Donors Trust, which is It's all about conservative policies and so forth. What they do is they take money in, and these are usually checks of at least 7 figures. This is the really big money, folks. Go into these things. Well, the first thing that happens is these guys get a tax break because it's a 501c3. So they immediately walk off with 30% off the tax. Okay? That's the first thing to grab. So then what they do, a 501c3 can only give to a 501c3. But there's a different class of 501c3, which I call advancement organizations. They are groups like Americans for Prosperity, okay, who are all about a view of life and politics. And they do seminars, they invite politicians and give them honoraria. They produce amicus filings to the Supreme Court. It leads the Supreme Court to think in their ways, one way or the other. And then they can also give to a 501c4. It's the 501c3 now. Supposed to be, can't put it in election. They give it to the 501c4 for advocacy purposes. They write an agreement. They put holy water on it, great, and then they ignore it. And so the 501c4s get more money, big money. And that pot that's divided by 49% go into election. That money way back there, not all of it, the money way back in that donor's trust, that 1630 fund, is getting into the election. And it's illegal. All right? And our thing that says who are the original donors are going to put a bloody stop to it because they've got to say where it came from. And if they say something like donors trust and went into election spending, by the way, they're both in trouble. The person who spent the money, knowing that they didn't know who the individual donor was, has committed a violation. And the person that has not cooperated with it, usually what will happen with the person who spends, they'll go, they got to make sure that they know who the donors are, right? So they may have to call the 501c4 that gave them money and say, who gave it to you? Okay? Well, if they don't cooperate, which is one of the things that they could fall down, they're in trouble because that's illegal in our people. You have to cooperate with finding and substantiating the original donors of the money you gave to someone. So that's a really important part about why we got to get at dark money, because it is a major pipe for huge political money, which surprised me no end, gets a tax deduction. And it's all political money. And it's big money.
You do have good answers. So all good information, and obviously the answers are so much information in the answers. So there were a couple books, and I run a book club for the Democrats and the Indivisible group in the area.
Cool.
And we read things about democracy and elections and everything. But a couple books that this presentation brought up are the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer.
Right. Seminal piece.
Yeah, seminal piece, and Democracy in Chains by Nancy McLean.
Right.
So I recommended those books to everybody to understand where we're at in our politics today.
Right.
Do you see this group kind of moving towards the education, like all of your answers are giving an education about what dark money is and how, so it's a lot more than just the petition.
Right.
It's kind of like an education of where our democracy is at, where the dark money and how, like the Democracy in Chains is kind of the backstory of Project 2025, really. It is.
By the way, I never talked about, just because I didn't know how long we had. This is completely corrupted the Supreme Court. This game is how nominees to the Supreme Court are made. It's like unbelievable.
So I guess my question is, do you see this group educating kind of Michigan in dark money and in kind of the background of Project 2025?
Right. I would definitely like to do that. In fact, one of the things that I keep noodling is how I get some resources that are reliable I'm going to explain what reliable means in just a second, to have a team of people that do more digging on what particularly is going on in Michigan. Because it really does take some very deep digging. One of the ways you do this, folks, is you go in and you take a look at the advertising records. When somebody spends politically, the person who's the advertiser, the receiver of the money, has to record who bought the time, were they for or against, and who that person was, et cetera. A lot of dark money goes into that thing. Of course, I swear to you, the traditional media would die in a minute if we didn't have $20 billion 3-4 years going into their pockets. So, at any rate, I played around with the idea of, well, there's a group. MCFA, Michigan Campaign Finance Network, that does some data grubbing in this regard, but they're funded on a limited basis. And I'm looking to try and put together a team of people who are willing to, get on a PC and start digging. Because a lot of this information can be found, but it takes time, people willing to do it, and it probably needs an individual or two who are paid to manage it so that it keeps rolling and the things that we're doing continue to take place. But I haven't found a money source yet that is willing to finance probably $100 grand a year to do that. So.
Any more questions, anybody? Okay, I think this wraps us up. Hank, thank you.
Thank you guys for
Very
having
informative.
me.